Caroline, good afternoon and good to see you. And of course, we do know that you have had a conversation with MSMEs, Principal Secretary, and in terms of what the presentations has been done by the 16 heads of state currently attending, what is the key focus aside from asking for more resources in Jenga?
They're talking about also a job creation, how as African we can stand as one. Remember, we have a very young, youthful population, and of course we have to take advantage of this to ensure that we grow as a continent and we speak one voice. And now I'm joined by the the Principal Secretary, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Susan Mang'eni, to tell us some of the key highlights that she has picked from the conversation that we've been having here from morning, and also a bit of what the presidents have talked about, speaking in one voice, speaking as one continent. We have to be united as Africans if we are to move as a continent. Thank you for joining us, PS. Maybe we can start from what the presidents have spoken. They've mostly spoken the same thing across, talking about eradication of poverty, talking about how we can change the global architecture, financial architecture. I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts about some of the areas that they have touched on?
Thank you very much. This summit happens each and every year, and this was the 21st summit, and it's happening at the backdrop of many issues affecting the continent. Back here at home, we are having tragedies all over because of the flooding that has happened. Just a few years ago, we were engulfed in the longest drought ever. So again, some 3 years back, all of us were affected with pandemic. So again, and it is true, like you have put it, we are talking about a young continent, full of young people in terms of the population. Back here in Kenya, the average age of a Kenyan is 17 years old. So that just demonstrates the dire situation in which we are in terms of making sure that we create jobs. So either the International Development Association brings together the donor countries, what you call the donor countries, and the recipient countries. And in this case, most of the recipient countries are from Africa, because we are still struggling with fighting poverty, with ensuring that our population is literate. We are fighting with hunger and many other natural crises surrounding us. So the central point of focus here has been, how do we ensure that we can access affordable financing? And we deepen this financing to all our sectors to support us, especially in growing our manufacturing sector. And I want to pitch it up from even beginning with the head of states, who laid it bare and say, most of the developing countries, especially African countries, are really heavily laden with debt repayment. The most of the revenue which we collect from our economies is all directed to us servicing the debts. And this then means that as a country, or as countries, then we have to set aside all our development priorities that have got direct impact to our population. We have to set aside priorities with regard to the livelihood of the people, access to healthcare, access to education, and access to the basic needs of our people. And this is what is making our economies not to grow, our people to remain settled in poverty. So we are saying we need to find international financing system to make them more flexible, to an extent that we can also have a breathing space to also now focus on developing our people by also trying to tackle those other socioeconomic challenges. In other words, after we service the debts, we remain with nothing to uplift the livelihood of our people. So that has been a very central argument during this morning when we were listening to them. The other argument is that we need now to have targeted financing in critical sectors which are enablers to growing our economy. There is no way we will create jobs if we do not grow our manufacturing sector. President Yoweri Museveni put it so clearly, and he said, listen, we cannot grow We cannot manufacture without low-cost energy, without low-cost transport. He even went ahead to give an example of railway connectivity and said, in the last 60 years, how many connections do we have in the continent? And you know, it's only railways. In most developed countries, the connectivity of railways is what promotes manufacturing, what promotes production, and what makes now the cost of living to come down. And so he said, we cannot create jobs. These are just going to be stories and stories. We're talking about energy. Look, energy is so costly. And even if you look at the internet connectivity technology that people are talking about, we still need to build the infrastructure. So the call here, I will say, the collective call here is how do we make sure that we do not just finance, but we are financing to those priority sectors that can actually help to stimulate economic development in the continent so that we can create jobs, raise wealth, and raise revenues for our economy and be able to support the upbringing and lift the livelihood of our population, which is very young. So I think the call is about that. Now, if you look at the statistics that are available today in terms of how much has come through IDA, the IDA financing, so far I think the continent have benefited to the tune of $1 trillion USD. But the deficit, for us to be able to take care of the challenges, the common challenges around climate change, pandemic, the young population, education, and everything, we need about 2.5 trillion USD. Then this one means that we need to sit on the table, us as the recipients and them as the donor, so that we have a common ground in terms of priorities and in terms of also letting them now, making them become more flexible in financing the sectors that you're asking them to finance. Because you saw also there was a common outcry about what is being financed today. Mostly capacity building, workshops and all those. So I think the Africa heads of states, they really want tangible interventions that can directly impact to our people. And they want us to sit together and work on those frameworks for financing so that we are also on that table. Not them sitting alone, but us sitting together. But above everything else, we also have had positive remarks coming out of the association so far for the last couple of years. I think the countries who are really grateful in terms of the support that has been coming through, especially through the World Bank. A lot of support has come from there, especially in terms of crisis. And today, as we heard from the opening remarks of the President of the World Bank, he also committed to support us as a country in terms of, alleviating the current situation of flood. We saw the President of Malawi really commending them of the support that they brought through when they were faced with the worst floods ever in their country. So I want to say, in terms of whenever we have a crisis, we've seen it. We've seen really this relationship, really coming in to help. But again, sustainably, we also need, as a nation, to benefit from that financing, as nations, as a continent, financing that will help us really to start now establishing our economy, establishing key sectors of economy, like in the manufacturing, so that we can create jobs for our population.
What of the proposal by President Ruto, where he said we need to redesign, and also you've talked about looking at the priority areas instead of the predetermined agendas of the donor countries, and also talking about the shift away from patronage, which is funding, to maybe equal partnership. I don't know what you think about that.
I think if I were to look at then in other words, you are partners. And when you are a partner, you begin by appreciating that each one of us are first. You can only be first among equal. There is something we are bringing on the table. Africa as a continent is bringing so much on the table. aside from the natural resources that we are now begging for money to support us in terms of enabling, us to unlock those potential, especially, be it in the mining sector, be it in what to help us, we are also bringing a young workforce on the global table. And we are saying, if we are to put in finance, you're also going to benefit in terms of other, for example, we are talking about if you invest in Africa, we have opportunities in terms of carbon sinks, because then a question of climate change in Africa is not, we are not emitters, okay? We are not emitters. That's why the whole world is turning to Africa and saying that, look, you now need to invest in green industrialization. So green industrialization means we got to save the planet. Yes, we will save the planet, but how about the livelihood? We are looking at majority of our population who have nothing to eat, who depends even on cutting down those trees to earn an income, burning charcoal and stuff. But if you are going to look at it from that micro level, how do I get this common mwananchi there at the grassroots who has nothing to put on the table to understand that instead of cutting trees, you can still achieve your food on the table through this and this mean? Then we have to feel the context of those people and bring about alternatives. Then what are these alternatives, for example, for us? And I think this was the president. They need to open their market for our traditional value chain, so that now we can encourage our people. For example, you need to focus to increase agricultural productivity. You've seen the government has gone ahead today. We have now subsidized fertilizers. We are now experiencing good yields. And you can tell people, like in the words of President Museveni, instead of now going to farm to eat, to put in your stomach, you can also put in your stomach at the same time put money in your pocket. But to put money in your pocket, they need to open the markets by flexing some of the conditionalities that those developed nations, who in this case they're also donors, put the conditionalities for accessing their market. They need to support us in building the capacity of our MSMEs, of our farmers, to meet those conditionality, so that then we can be able to access their market. They also need to be willing to come and set up factories, manufacturing plants in our soil, so that as they do that, then we'll be creating jobs. We do value addition. So that's how we are looking at it. Otherwise, we'll be talking about, okay, we need to encourage green transition, green economy, we need to go green. Everybody's talking about green because of the climate change and everything. But then how about that mwananchi? How about that mama mboga who is there, who depends on her farm without support of acquiring the right farm inputs? This mama is likely just to engage in the way, in the traditional way of farming, which could create havoc to the environment. So what we are saying is that we need to meet somewhere. They need to understand that ours is a question of livelihood, ours is a question of poverty eradication, job creation, ours is a question of the youth bulge, which we might of really exploiting the numbers and creating dividends out of it for our economy. But you see, now we need to meet somewhere, and when they are designing those financial systems, since we are partners, we need to participate from the design, planning, and even implementation. You cannot be a partner when only one party creates the rule. You will not feel comfortable in playing with those rules. I mean, to play better in the game, we have to sit down and agree on the rules so that each one of us now becomes responsible. And I think that's the message which you're saying here. We are saying we need to be on that table. We need to think together. We need to plan together, because we are not vulnerable. Do not look at us as just being vulnerable. We have opportunities. Look at us from an opportunity perspective, not from vulnerable, where you only want to come to us when you're having crisis. No, yes, crisis. Even as at one point, we were saying we will come to you when you have crisis. But now, for us to move together as one planet, as one people of this world, we have to see each other, see value in each other, and bring all cards on the table and we plan together and we design the rule of games.
Thank you so much, PS. Well, that is the PS for micro, small and medium enterprises talking to us and sharing her thoughts on what she thinks about the conversation that we've been having here with the heads of state early morning, talking about redesigning the financial architecture and also looking at how we can enhance the global value chain and also ensure that we are part of this conversation and you're not left behind. As I had earlier on indicated, the heads of presidents are in a closed door meeting discussing the Nairobi IDA communique, and once they are done, of course, the president of Kenya, that is William Ruto, will come and give us the declaration that they will be done once they finalize the communique. Now we'll take you back in studio.